Welcome to Two Therapists Talking. The hope for this podcast is to talk about important issues related to couples and individuals who are struggling in their lives with many different issues. I'm David Thompson, a marriage and family therapist.
And I'm Sheri Christensen, marriage and family therapist. Please join us as we explore these issues together, and we hope you will learn and be enlightened along the way. Come find us at twotherapisttalking.com. If you like what you're hearing, please get on and rate us and subscribe to the podcast.
Hi, and welcome back to Two Therapists Talking. I'm David.
And I'm Sheri.
Today we are revisiting a subject that we've done before, but in a new light. And I think it's helpful for people who follow the podcast and listen to these episodes to know more of some of the things that are going on for us. And this is kind of a big one.
Yes, it is.
No way around it.
It's a pretty big one.
But neat because it's also helping us to see something a little bit differently that we've talked about before.
Yeah.
And so we would like to talk again about forgiveness, but from a different angle, and there's good reason for that.
Yeah, talking a little bit about the whys and the hows. I think last time we talked a lot about
What it is and what it isn't.
What it is and what it isn't, yes.
But we didn't really talk about the whys or the hows, so this is good.
Yeah.
Why, and here's a good question for Sheri.
Here we go.
Why forgiveness? Why
are we talking about forgiveness today? Yeah, well, I guess I need to tell you what's been going on in my life. Tell everybody here what's been going on in my life the last, 5.5 weeks, maybe? Well, I guess by the time we actually put this podcast up on air,
Maybe, yeah.
It'll probably be a little over 2 months.
Yeah,
maybe about 2 months, maybe. Yeah, so July 11th of this year, I was doing my workout for the morning before I went to the office and was riding on the South Jordan Trail for you Utah folk. Outside of Utah, just one of the bike trails around in this area, and was going home after. I live not too terribly far from it, and I was almost home at a intersection that is occasionally busy, but in the morning it is, with a lot of commuters, and was crossing the intersection on my bike and was hit by a car. My body landed about 100 feet from where I was hit. I remember David's giving me a look like, what? Yes.
I don't remember that detail,
You
but
remember that, yeah.
I'm visualizing that, and it kind of makes my eyes get big.
Yeah. I remember looking down at my pedal and looking up to see the car hitting my body. I don't remember hitting the windshield after that or flying through the air, but I remember hitting the ground and everything that happened afterward. So when I hit the ground or the windshield, I'm not sure, but I crushed my L1 vertebrae. And it's actually a complete miracle that I'm not paralyzed. If you think of a body or anything being thrown that far or being really thrown any distance, laws of physics sort of dictate that you have to continue coming in contact with the ground, right, until you've had enough friction to stop your body. That would be a lot in this case, but I didn't roll or bounce or whatever across the ground. My body just stopped. And that, to me, is a complete and utter miracle, because if I had, with that crushed vertebrae, I would have severed my spinal cord, or at least severely damaged it to the point where I wouldn't be walking or anything ever again. So that, to me, is just a huge miracle, and I'm very, very grateful for that. So after that, I was in the ICU, and then had surgery on that. So now I've got a, I don't know, foot long metal rod in my back and 5 screws, and was in the hospital for a week, and now I'm home. And I've been home for, I guess now, a while, just recovering and looking at the long-term, year-long trajectory of being, of healing from that level of injury and all the things that I cannot do now and won't be able to do for a long time, which you would be surprised at how much that is. I don't know, maybe you wouldn't be surprised if you break your back, but I can't do most everything. I can't sit for long periods of time. I can't stand for long periods of time. I can't bend or lift or twist or, anything for a long time. So that pretty much rules out almost everything, which can be hard for someone who's very active. But so I've had a lot of experience with people talking to me about forgiveness because I don't have any negative feelings toward the man that hit me. Pretty instantly had completely forgiven him. And so I've had a lot of people talking to me about that and how could you do that?
And for you, was that just natural, automatic, or did it feel like, okay, I'm going to weigh the pros and the cons and make a decision here?
Yeah, no, it was very, very automatic. It almost didn't really cross my mind that there was even
like it's an option just not to.
Yes. Yeah. And so we wanted to talk about forgiveness in terms of why that is not really, to me, an option not to forgive, and why that's developed in my life, and why, as we look at forgiveness, why is that important, and then talk a little bit about how as well.
It may sound good, but the how is the hard part. And I know that the more you're hurting, the harder it is to put the pieces together. And okay, if there were steps, maybe that would be helpful. Yes. Someone just tell me step A, step B, when it's hard to do. Yes. And I think the more you understand the why, the easier it becomes, but it doesn't completely become easy. Mm-hmm. And especially in certain situations where it's intentional harm or hurt or betrayal, it's very hard.
It can be extremely challenging to forgive. And, and I think there's reason for that. But I think as we start to understand that why, of forgiveness, then it gives us at least more of a desire, which I think is the first step of forgiving.
Yeah, definitely. So why forgive? Let's talk about that a little bit. I think for Sheri, it comes easily. I mean, I know her fairly well now.
Yeah, and it was a long time.
We're different that way, I think. I don't think it's as easy for me, and that's okay. But the why is important because, maybe you've been taught your whole life you need to forgive. And if you're coming from, a Christian background, certainly it's a commandment and we need to forgive. But besides that, which is a good reason, I don't want to take away from that, but why forgive?
Yeah.
I was reading a book or listening to a book recently called The Emotion Code, and it talked about energy.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a big one. So energy in the sense of what we know now through science is that, atoms are 90% space. Mm-hmm. And if you get really, really, really small, everything is just a wavelength of light. It's like a vibrating energy. And so everything is made up of energy. Everything is energy.
Yes.
And we're learning more and more about this, which is fascinating. But there's different kinds of energy. Yep. And you think of like music or tone. There's frequency. There's vibration.
Vibration. Mm-hmm.
And what's the energy of forgiveness? What's the energy of love? I know a lot of you might be familiar with experiments done with water.
Yes.
And there's certain energy directed at water, and then the water will form certain patterns. And if
Yes.
the energy is I hate you, they tend to be irregular patterns. When
Yeah.
the energy is I love you and other positive things, they're symmetrical and different.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
So we know there's just energy in everything. And so the question becomes, what type of energy do you want to be or to have in you?
Right. And I love that you said be, because it is literally the cells of your being,
Yeah.
right? Like, so what is it that you want to be? It's not just have or like a thought or a feeling or whatever. We're literally talking about the energy
Being.
of your cells. Like, what are you? And I think that, the more that we practice forgiveness and these higher energy, higher vibration types of things, of actions and feelings and emotions, the easier it is then to incorporate others, whether it's more of the same or different.
Why would that be important, do you think? I mean, you think of a life lived in, let's call it a higher
Right,
frequency or
right.
vibration versus a lower, and what difference, what impact would it have on our quality of life?
Well, I think, we talk about that what you do, just affects your quality of life. And I think this is like, oh, this is why it affects your
Yeah,
quality of life, right?
yeah,
And I think it changes your life, right? It changes your relationship with everyone, with yourself. It changes how you interact with the world around you. If we're looking at like all of these studies on emotion and different things like that, when it's changing your cells for the better, it's changing your cells for the better. Like physically, you live longer, you
yeah.
have better health, the chemicals in your brain work a lot better,
Hmm.
so you're going to be less depressed, you're going to be less anxious, you're going to have these mental health benefits, these physical health benefits, these relational benefits and connection with others. But it's almost even more than just other people. I think you have a different energy with everything around you,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And I'm jumping ahead maybe, but I can't help but think if you are forgiving, how does that impact your ability to forgive yourself? If this were like a
Yeah.
frequency or vibration and
Yes.
you have this in you because you're giving it to others or to somebody important, you're already in that place.
Mm-hmm.
Your
Your
body
cells are
feels it, your
changing.
cells have it,
Mm-hmm.
and forgiving self, or even just feeling God's forgiveness.
Yes. Yes. Which is huge, I think, in
Yeah.
this whole process.
I wonder if it's kind of if it's a hack. God knows that if you forgive others, you will feel more forgiveness for yourself and more forgiveness from Him. Because if we're
Mm.
not forgiving others and we don't feel like we can forgive ourselves, how much forgiveness are we actually allowing from Him? And maybe the idea is, oh, He forgives me, He loves me, but do we really accept it when it's not, the energy that is in us?
Right. It's kind of like what you were talking about before with the patterns in the water, that these irregular, disjointed patterns came from the negative
Yeah,
energies. And when you have those higher energies, it flows, right?
yeah,
All
it
of that,
flows. Yep.
it flows. It's the difference between when you have negative energies like a hate or a resentment or a I'm not going to forgive. Those are closed spaces,
Yeah,
right? It's a closed feeling. It's a closed off energy. It's almost like an electrical current, right? And I know very little about these things, but I do know your on and off switch is a breaking that current versus connecting that current so that it flows through. And I think those visuals can help us understand what happens with our own energy, our own vibrations in ourselves, connected to God, and with others, with all of humanity, and with all of creation.
Yeah.
And so all of these high vibration spaces, love, gratitude, forgiveness, these are all ways that open connection, that open flow of energy, which brings more light, which is also conducive to the reciprocation of those things,
Right.
or a more likelihood to step into some of these other spaces. When I think of forgiveness, and as we're trying to formulate, how do we talk about this, how do we want to explain this, David, you were talking a lot about love and forgiveness and how those are connected. I think also gratitude and forgiveness are really
These are all
connected.
higher frequencies, no question.
Yes.
I think about these experiments with water and how it's interesting that 70% of our body is water.
Yeah.
And if we're in flow or symmetrical,
Yes.
or the current can get through easier, that's significant. And the impact that we have on others, when you think about somebody who is really grumpy, grouchy, how it can kind of spread, and you start to feel the same way just being around them because it's energy, or
Yes.
vice versa, somebody who's very positive and happy, you just feel better.
Yes.
And so I think we really underestimate the impact of our energy, or at least
Yes.
maybe we don't identify it this way.
And I think, we've just talked in recent episodes, right, about,
Right.
as we're talking about that openness and that flow and that light, and that, there's even more than that, right? As we're around other people and we're in those same spaces, the synergy that they can actually measure, and your
Yeah.
heartbeats and your brain waves that start to regulate and
To sync. Yeah.
that creates more power, and it creates more light, and it creates all of these things. So it's really this incredible experience in and of your own being, but also as we interact with other beings, right? It changes everything. It brings everything to a higher, more healthy, more healed, more gratitude, more love, more forgiveness, more shared experience, more connectedness.
I think of Sheri now and more healed, and the benefit her body has being in a forgiving place than in angry, resentment, bitter, holding a grudge. I mean, her body's in the process now of healing, and it's going to be a long process. But what kind of flow do you want in your body when you are healing, when it needs everything?
Yes.
Imagine being angry and living with that every day and feeling like this isn't fair and it's ruined your life, and the impact that would have.
Yeah.
I mean, no doubt if we're doing studies on the length of time that somebody feels healed, that's going to impact that.
Yeah, for sure. And, and I think there's actually evidence of that in my experience. Doctors are already shocked at the level of healing that is taking place. And obviously, some things just still take time, right?
Yeah.
A bonus healing. But I walked into my first post-op appointment, and the physician who saw me I was not seen by the physician who had operated on me, and he literally didn't believe that I was the patient.
Because you came walking in.
Because I was walking in and walking so well and holding my body so well. He even mentioned just my affect, and just everything about me did not exude at all the fact that I had been in the ICU 2.5 weeks ago.
Wow.
And so I think there is some evidence of that, right? And it's interesting because in the past, as I've talked about negative emotions and things like that with clients, we talk about how that's kind of like, flushing energy down the toilet. Like, really, you can choose to spend your time and energy doing that if you really want to.
Right.
But it's, it's just kind of getting wasted when you could be using that in other spaces. But I think it's even more than that. As we're talking about this concept, it's not just a, like, okay, we're sort of zeroed out, but it's actually it's a negative. It's taking you away from all of those good things.
Yeah. And I really believe that like attracts like. And if that's the energy, you're bringing that in towards you. And it's kind of this law of attraction effect.
Right.
Where you wonder why everything feels like it's not going well. And sure, part of that is perspective, but
Right.
you are also attracting things into your life that are negative, that are heavy, that are darker, that are, let's call it a lower frequency,
Yes.
lower vibration.
Yes.
And I see that a lot too. So
yeah. And I think about, my experience being in, the ICU and the hospital and all the different nurses and people that attend to you, and being in that space of forgiveness, but also of those other higher vibrations of light, of love, of gratitude,
yeah,
and choosing to be there, because I think you do have to make that choice. And I think I've worked on that many years of choosing that, so it wasn't as maybe hard of a choice as it would have been in times past, because I've seen the benefits of it over so many choices, and sitting in it for a long time and then going, okay, well, this kind of sucks. Like, this isn't helping me at all.
Right.
And when I choose this, I feel very different. But choosing to allow that free flow of energy instead of stopping that. I had so many beautiful experiences with the people that were helping me, right? As I would interact with them, I had a nurse from the Middle East, and just in talking and in sharing with her and in appreciating her, loving her, all of those experiences, she was willing and able to share. She shared some very, very hard things about her escaping from the Middle East and being here, and just really hard things, and saying, I've never told a soul this before.
right.
And what a beautiful experience. I was so honored that she would be willing to share that with me. That is, I had a guy that pushed my bed over to get, x-rays and MRIs and things like that. And he had a similar experience, coming from a couple of places in Asia, and also shared some things with me, right? And it's an opening, right?
Wow.
That just opened up these spaces of connection, and it changed things, right? It changes us. And I am so much better for having had those connective experiences with them, but even small things of choosing positivity, right? Like, being one of the things that I found was really challenging was being rolled onto this gurney, rolled onto that gurney, rolled back onto this board, back onto here, rolled here for imaging. I had that experience many times when they're telling you, don't move anything or you could be paralyzed. So every time I'm being rolled, it's like, this could be the last time that I feel, right? My legs, this could be the last time that this might be the difference between me walking and not. And that's a really hard something to think about.
Yeah.
And to have happen. And so, and of course you got like 6 people doing that, each time, trying to keep you as still as possible. And I prepare myself, they cross your arms over your chest, and then, okay, you've got 1, 2, 3, right? And so I kind of just kind of grit. Okay, here it comes. And I just, you kind of make tighten, just and do the things you need to kind of get through it. Right. And I had several of them say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. So sorry." And the choice is, do I want to sit in this like horrible thing, whatever, or do I want to choose a positive frequency and energy? And that positive frequency and energy is so much like more helpful, in my opinion, for me. And so I chose that. And my response was that it is so worth it if it means I can still feel. Like, instead of sitting in the pain and being upset about the pain, it was, I'm grateful for the pain. I'm grateful for it because it means I can still walk and feel and all of that.
That's an interesting concept, huh?
Yeah.
It's a neat one. So shared humanity.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of sharing that you're describing.
Yes.
And impacting positively lots of other lives.
But it's not just that. It's the impact that they then have on you. Right?
Yeah.
It's an open conduit both ways. And it brings everyone and everything up, just thinking of how much I was blessed by each of those people and each of those interactions. And then the response, like, in the ICU, you don't have a lot of people who are really even coherent, let alone in a very positive space. And a lot of nurses that really loved me. Oh my goodness, I'm so happy to get to talk to someone who's like talking and then is positive and all of the things, right? But how much more was I blessed by getting to interact with them and, feel of their lives. And it can be easy. And sometimes we need to, when we're in, for example, a lot of trauma, sometimes we need to narrow our focus so that we can be more inside of what's going on and focus on that. And we can't do all the things for all the people when we're in those, places. It's kind of being in an emotional ICU, right? Like, you have to kind of focus on things that need attention, right?
Right.
But when we can step out of those spaces emotionally and connect with others, it expands our capacities and it changes our viewpoints and our lives, and that energy flow is just really an incredible experience. I think that's why you hear kind of phrases like, yeah, if you're having a hard time, go serve someone else or go help someone else, right?
Right.
Because it gets you out of that place of closedness and into more of a space of openness. So I think that shared humanity with the energy flows and why is a critical piece. And that goes up, right, to our relationship with God. It goes out to our relationship with others. It goes through our own selves and our relationship to ourselves. And I think it's just this really beautiful connected space.
I think as we're talking more about this, there is more to share. And
yes,
I really like how this is a lot more personal. And so what we want to do is follow this episode up with another episode where we finish up on the second half. Really, we want to talk more about how,
right,
like we mentioned earlier.
Right.
And not just, hey, forgiveness is a good thing. And now that
Yay.
we've maybe
Go
convinced you that this is something that you really want, how do we do this? And I think that's a really good question. And I hear that a lot,
right,
as a therapist. And so we want to spend more time on that. And so please stay tuned for the follow-up episode.
Our part 2.
I know we do a lot of part twos, but this is just the way it works out. So part 2, how of forgiveness. And we get to hear maybe the other side of the story a little bit.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to Two Therapists Talking. We look forward to sharing more conversations with you. Connect with us at twotherapisttalking.com or email podcast@twotherapisttalking.com. If you like what you're hearing, please get on and rate us and subscribe to the podcast.